I made this rainbow scarf with the NSI Knitting Machine. Thank you, Margaret, for the idea. This scarf measures 2.5 inches wide, and if I move the camera closer, you can see that the stitches are absolutely perfect. Isn't he cute? I crocheted a curlicue to put on the end for his tail. The rainbow snake scarf in the previous segment was made by the NSI Knitting Machine. The NSI Knitting Machine is a smaller version of the Innovations Knitting Machine. The Innovations Knitting Machine has 42 needles. The NSI Knitting Machine has 20 needles. Let's take a closer look at the machine. It has a yarn guide, and it also has a tension guide. And I'm going to turn the machine up a little bit so you can see it. Now the big thing is, once the yarn is threaded through this guide, it has to be threaded through the tension guide as well. If the yarn is not threaded through properly, then it's just going to pop off and you're going to lose all your stitches. Another thing is, there is no marking for the starter peg or the starter needle. So you have to figure out which needle is a starter needle by flipping the switch to flat panel knitting and then turning the crank and finding out where it stops. It stops here. Now I'm going to go backwards. And it stops here. So the peg right here has to be marked with a permanent marker. Here is a close-up view of the tension guide. I did my basic cast on, and the yarn feeds through the guide at the top, and it comes down and goes through another guide, and you have to weave the yarn through those little plastic rods. And at the bottom there's like a half circle with a little cut in it, and you have to put the yarn through that little cut or the little opening. If the yarn comes out of that bottom loop, then you're going to find that your tension guide will drop and you will lose stitches. So this guide has to be up at all times when the machine is cranking, and it can be unstable because you have to worry about this tension guide, and you have to worry about holding the machine's top handle, and it's right here, and at the bottom you only have 3 legs. Yes, it does make beautiful stitches, but there's frustration that goes along with it. It does crank nicely, but it can be fussy with different types of yarn. Let me demonstrate how to knit with this machine, and I'm knitting in the round. Sometimes it can get fussy, and when you're cranking, when it gets to be hard to crank, you might lose some stitches, and you have to keep on pulling yarn from your ball to make sure that it's loose before it even goes through the tension guide. And I'll try again. And you can hear the cranking, that it's hard to crank. Now, as I said, it makes beautiful stitches, and you can see that there's a tube forming in the middle. And as I feel around, the stitches are nicely formed. Right in here, I don't feel any problems yet. But this was the yarn that that was with the machine. So I will crank again. And there we have a tube. Yes, this is a nice knitting machine, but it does take some practice. After working with an Addy, you can't compare it to an Addy. This is, I would say, this would be a great tutorial or learning tool for children before they experience an Addy. But there's a lot of trial and error before a project is even made. I hope you found this demonstration helpful. If you are interested in purchasing the NSI Knitting Machine, you can buy it at Toys R Us for $34.99, or you can purchase it at Amazon.com.